My parents gave my college fund to my gifted sister. 10 years later, when they needed help with medical bills, I sent them her number. She never finished college and was living in their old basement. So this all started when I was scrolling through Facebook a few weeks ago. Someone I went to high school with posted about their kid graduating college debt-free. They were gushing about how they'd set up a college fund when their kid was a toddler and stuck with it no matter what. It was one of those humble brag posts, you know the kind, but it stopped me cold because it hit a wound I thought I'd buried years ago. You see, I was supposed to have a college fund too. My parents made a big deal about it when I was growing up. Every birthday, every Christmas, my dad would smile and say, "We're putting this toward your future, Amber. One day you'll thank us." And as a kid, I believed him. I didn't even ask for expensive gifts or complain when we didn't go on vacations like my friends' families did. "It's for college," they'd say, and I bought into it completely. But here's the thing. When the time came for me to actually go to college, that fund was gone. I remember the exact day I found out. I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of college brochures. My dad, Andrew, came in with a cup of tea, and I casually asked if we could sit down soon to figure out which schools we could afford with my fund. He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. Then he gave me this tight smile and said, "We'll talk about it later." Later turned out to be the next day when my parents sat me down in the living room. My mom, Isabella, cleared her throat and said, "Amber, we need to talk about your college plans." The tone was serious, which instantly set me on edge. That's when they told me the college fund was gone. At first, I thought they meant something awful had happened, like they'd been scammed or hit with some unexpected medical bills. But no. They had spent it on my younger sister, Gabriella. Gabriella, the gifted one, the golden child, the one who got all the attention growing up because she was so smart and full of potential. When I was struggling to get B's in algebra, Gabriella was winning math competitions. When I was busting my ass in after-school jobs to save up for college, Gabriella was off at robotics camps and private tutoring sessions, fully funded by our parents. Apparently those camps and tutors weren't cheap, and my parents, in their infinite wisdom, decided that Gabriella's education was a better investment. My dad even said that phrase, a better investment, like I was some outdated stock they'd written off. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. I trusted them. They made me believe they had my back, that I wouldn't have to fight so hard to get ahead. And now they were telling me to apply for scholarships and take out loans because Gabriella needed that money more. The worst part? Gabriella didn't even seem to feel bad about it. She was 16 at the time, and when I confronted her, she just shrugged and said, "It's not my fault you're not as good at school." I can still feel the way my stomach dropped when she said that. It wasn't just arrogant, it was entitlement. She genuinely believed she deserved it more than I did. I ended up putting myself through college with a combination of scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs. I worked at the campus library, waited tables on weekends, and spent summers doing construction with my aunt. It wasn't easy, but I made it work. Meanwhile, Gabriella breezed through high school and started at a fancy private college, fully funded by what should have been my college fund. For years, I swallowed my anger and focused on my own life. I didn't have the energy to stay mad, but every now and then, I'd hear updates about Gabriella from my parents, how she was switching majors again, how she needed more money for this or that program, how she was struggling to find her path. And every time, it stung. I tried to keep my distance from my family after that. I still called on birthdays and sent cards on holidays, but the closeness we had when I was a kid was gone. I poured everything into my career, determined to build something for myself, by myself. But here's the kicker. Just when I thought I'd moved on, they pulled me back in. Last month, out of the blue, my dad called me. He sounded off, nervous, maybe even a little ashamed. He said he and my mom needed to talk to me about something important. Something about family. And that's where things really started to unravel. Update. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from my dad. That wasn't unusual in itself. We kept up a minimal level of contact over the years. A birthday call here, a holiday card there. But when I saw his name on my screen, I hesitated. Something about it felt off. When I answered, his voice was shaky, like he was trying too hard to sound cheerful but couldn't quite pull it off. "Hi, Amber," he started, pausing just long enough to make me feel uneasy. "It's been a while. How are you?" Small talk wasn't his style. My dad was the kind of person who cut straight to the point, so his sudden interest in my life felt strange. After a couple of polite but awkward exchanges, he dropped the act. We need to talk, he said. It's important. Important. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. I leaned against the kitchen counter, bracing myself. Okay, I said. What's going on? There was another pause, longer this time, before he finally admitted, Your mother and I are having some financial troubles. We were hoping you might be able to help. I can't say I was surprised. I'd always suspected that my parents weren't great with money. Growing up, they'd stretched themselves thin trying to give Gabriella every possible advantage, but I never thought much about where the money was coming from. Hearing him say it out loud, though, was something else entirely. Help how? I asked carefully. Well, he started, his voice faltering. Your mom's medical bills have been piling up, and we've fallen behind on the mortgage. We just need a little help to get back on track. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My parents had made it abundantly clear years ago where their priorities lay. And now, after a decade of silence on anything that wasn't superficial, they were coming to me for a bailout. Have you talked to Gabriella? I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. We have, but she's not in a position to help right now. That caught my attention. What do you mean? Another long pause. She's been living with us, he admitted reluctantly. For a while now, things didn't exactly go as planned for her after college. I didn't press him for details then, but the picture was starting to come together. Gabriella, their golden child, the one who got everything handed to her on a silver platter, was back under their roof, living in the same basement where we used to play video games as kids. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. So let me get this straight, I said. You gave her my college fund, paid for her expensive education, and now she's living with you rent-free, and you're asking me for money? His response was immediate. Amber, this isn't about that. This is about family. We're in trouble, and we need your help. It was like he didn't even hear me. Like the years of struggle I'd gone through to make something of myself didn't matter. Like Gabriella's failures were just bad luck, while my success was somehow guaranteed all along. I'll think about it, I said eventually, just to get him off the phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation, digging up memories I hadn't thought about in years. The fights, the favoritism, the endless excuses for Gabriella's behavior. And now, they wanted me to swoop in and save the day. The next morning, I decided to call Gabriella. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I needed to hear her side of the story. When she answered, her tone was defensive from the start, like she was expecting a fight. What do you want, Amber? She asked. Dad said you're living with them, I said. He also said they're in trouble and you can't help. What's going on? She sighed heavily, like this conversation was a huge inconvenience. Yeah, I'm here. Things didn't work out after college, okay? I'm figuring it out. Figuring it out? I repeated. It's been years, Gabriella. What have you been doing? Why do you care? She shot back. You've always looked down on me anyway. I bit back the urge to yell. This isn't about me. It's about Mom and Dad. They're drowning in bills, and they're asking me for help because you can't step up. Her response was immediate and wry. Oh, so now you're the perfect daughter, Miss Self-Made. Give me a break. You wouldn't be where you are if they hadn't paid for your food and a roof over your head when we were kids. That hit a nerve. I had to take a deep breath before responding. They sacrificed for you, Gabriella. They gave you everything I didn't get, and you still managed to screw it up. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, she said, I don't need a lecture from you. Maybe not, I said, but you need to figure your life out, because I'm not cleaning up your messes. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to help my parents, even after everything they'd done, but another part of me, the bigger part, knew this wasn't my responsibility. In the end, I called my dad back. I'm sorry, I told him. I can't help you. If you need support, you should talk to Gabriella. She's the one you invested in. He sounded shocked, maybe even hurt. Amber, please. I have my own life to take care of, I said firmly. I worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to put myself at risk because Gabriella didn't live up to your expectations. I gave him Gabriella's number, just in case he didn't already have it, and hung up. It felt cold, even harsh, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself. Still, I couldn't help wondering what would happen next. Final update. A week after I told my dad I wouldn't help them, I got a text from my mom. It wasn't long, just, we need to talk. No punctuation, no explanation. I stared at the message for a while, debating whether to respond, before deciding to ignore it. Whatever they needed to say could wait. A few days later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was cryptic, regarding your family. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a short, blunt message. Hi, Amber. You don't know me, but I'm Gabriella's landlord. She left your email as an emergency contact. She hasn't paid rent in 3 months, and I can't get in touch with her. I thought you should know. Mark. I couldn't believe it. Gabriella had apparently moved out of my parents' house without telling them or me, and was now dragging my name into her mess. My first instinct was to call my dad and demand answers, but I stopped myself. No, this wasn't my problem. I'd made that clear. But then something happened that forced me to get involved. A week later, I came home to a certified letter sitting in my mailbox. It was from a collections agency. Gabriella, it seemed, had used my name and my credit as a co-signer for something. I had no idea what, but the letter said I was on the hook for $112,000. I saw red. My hands were shaking as I read the letter, my mind racing. How could she have done this? How could my own sister stoop so low? I took a day to calm down and gather evidence before making my move. I called the collections agency and explained the situation, letting them know I'd never co-signed anything for Gabriella. They advised me to file a police report for fraud, which I did the next morning. But I wasn't done. I decided it was time for Gabriella to face the consequences of her actions. I hired a private investigator, a small splurge I considered well worth the price, and asked them to dig into Gabriella's financial history. What they uncovered shocked even me. Not only had Gabriella been using my name to co-sign loans, but she'd also opened a credit card in my name. The card had been maxed out months ago, and she'd been making minimum payments just to keep it from going to collections, until recently. Armed with this information, I filed a second police report and started the process of disputing the fraudulent accounts. I made it clear to the investigator that I wanted a record of everything. If Gabriella was going to burn bridges, I'd make sure there was no way for her to weasel out of the mess she'd created. Meanwhile, my parents were still calling and texting, begging me to be the bigger person and help Gabriella get back on her feet. My dad even had the audacity to say, "Family forgives, Amber. You don't want to ruin your relationship over something like this." I laughed out loud when I read that. Relationship? What relationship? They burned that bridge years ago when they chose Gabriella's potential over my future. But the final blow came a few weeks later. Gabriella must have realized I was taking legal action because she called me out of the blue. Her voice was desperate, a far cry from the arrogant tone I remembered. "Amber," she said, "I messed up, okay? I just need a little help to fix this. Please, girl, you can't just throw me to the wolves." I let her talk for a while, her excuses piling up like garbage on a sidewalk. Then, when she finally stopped to breathe, I said, "You're right, Gabriella. I can't throw you to the wolves." She sighed in relief. "Thank you. Because you threw yourself to the wolves a long time ago," I interrupted. "And now you can deal with the fallout." I hung up before she could respond. That was the last time I spoke to Gabriella. In the end, she had to deal with the fraud charges on her own. She tried calling my parents for help, but they were tapped out, financially and emotionally. She ended up declaring bankruptcy, and last I heard, she was couch surfing at a friend's place. As for my parents, they stopped asking me for help after that. I think they finally realized I wasn't their safety net anymore. Do I feel guilty? A little, if I'm being honest. But mostly I feel free. Free from the weight of their expectations, their guilt trips, and their blatant favoritism. I've built a life for myself that they had no part in, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control. Sometimes I think about the version of my life where my parents hadn't gambled everything on Gabriella. Would things have been easier? Probably. But I also wouldn't be the person I am today. Someone who knows her worth and won't let anyone take advantage of her again. So yeah, maybe this story didn't end with a perfect reconciliation or some cheerful family reunion. But honestly, I think that's okay. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting go. 6 months after everything went down, I received an unexpected package in the mail. It was a small, worn cardboard box with my parents' return address. Inside, I found a stack of old photos, report cards, and childhood drawings. There was also a letter from my mom. "Dear Amber," it began, "I've been doing some cleaning, trying to sort through decades of memories. Finding these made me realize how much we failed you. Not just with the college fund, but with everything. We got so caught up in Gabriella's potential that we never saw yours shining right in front of us." I sat on my living room floor, spreading out the contents of the box. There was a photo of me at my 8th grade graduation, beaming proudly despite my braces and awkward bangs. Another showed me working at my first summer job, covered in dirt from landscaping but smiling anyway. Pictures of achievements that had gone uncelebrated because Gabriella had always commanded the spotlight. The letter continued. I know an apology doesn't begin to cover it. What Gabriella did with the credit fraud was inexcusable, and our reaction, trying to protect her again instead of standing up for you, was even worse. Your father and I have been in counseling, trying to understand where we went wrong. We're not asking for forgiveness or money. We just wanted you to have these memories and to know that we see you now. I found myself crying, not from sadness or anger, but from a kind of bittersweet recognition. These weren't tears of reconciliation. That bridge was still firmly burned, but of acknowledgement. Finally, they saw what they'd done. A week later, I got a call from my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister. She'd heard about everything and wanted to meet for coffee. Over lattes, she shared some family history I'd never known. Apparently, my mom had been the Gabriella of her generation, the gifted child who'd gotten all the attention while Linda worked her way through life with minimal support. History has a way of repeating itself, she said, stirring her coffee. Your mom became exactly what she swore she never would be. But you, Amber, you broke the cycle. She was right. Despite everything, or maybe because of it, I'd built something different. My small consulting firm was thriving. I had just bought my first house, a modest but beautiful craftsman with a garden I was slowly bringing to life. And most importantly, I'd found peace. Last I heard, Gabriella was working at a call center in another state. She reached out to me through a cousin, asking if I'd consider dropping the fraud charges. I didn't respond. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. My parents still send occasional emails, short updates about their lives, careful not to ask for anything. I read them, but rarely respond. Maybe someday we'll find a way to have a relationship again, but it won't be built on obligation or guilt. It'll be built on respect, something that took them losing me to finally understand. Yesterday, I was sorting through some papers and found that old Facebook post that had triggered everything, the one about the college fund. I couldn't help but smile. My own savings account now has a healthy balance earmarked for future education. Not for any kids yet, I'm not there, but for the possibility. And I know one thing for certain, if I ever have children, they'll grow up knowing they're equally valued, equally supported, and equally loved. Sometimes people ask me if I regret taking such a hard stance with my family. They say things like, blood is thicker than water, or you only get one family. But I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about choices. My parents chose Gabriella. Gabriella chose to take advantage, and I chose myself. And that choice has made all the difference. Looking back at that teenage girl sitting at the kitchen table with her college brochures, heart about to be broken, I wish I could tell her something. Your worth isn't determined by their investment in you. Your potential isn't limited by their vision. And sometimes the family you build for yourself, through friendships, through hard work, through self-respect, is stronger than the one you were born into. So here I am, 10 years after that college fund betrayal, writing this story not as a victim, but as a victor. Not because I got revenge, but because I got free. Free to build my own life, make my own choices, and write my own story. And maybe, just maybe, someone else out there needs to hear this. It's okay to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to let go. Because sometimes letting go isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a better one.